Beyond AI literacy, I mean, the other kind of piece that I think people may or may not be thinking about is human skills, or what some people call soft skills, are going to be increasingly important as machines take over more of the administrative duties. Welcome to the Tourism AI podcast, where Josh Houston and I talk about all things at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. Josh, it's been a while. We haven't really talked much coming off of American Thanksgiving. Did you
Yeah,
have a good break?
great break. Lots of good family time, lots of good food,
Nice.
nice
You're
rest.
you're
Can't
all caught up?
complain. Yeah, actually had a really quiet week. We've hit the December slowdown of meetings and conversations, and it's been very nice to have a little bit of peace and quiet.
Yeah, we were just talking before we hit record. I have not had that week. It's been a week of just like workshops and sessions and meetings and running from one thing to the next. I got one more full day today, and then things start to look like, Christmas is coming. But as entrepreneurs, we sprint right to the end, right, Josh? We don't slow down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a hurry up and catch up, and it's
Yeah.
yeah, just less conversations when we got head down. So
Do all the things you haven't been able to get to, right? So, yeah. Speaking of all the things, so today's topic, we're going to talk about the skills in the AI era. And so, just to kind of tee this one up a little bit, obviously, AI literacy is a huge topic and a huge thing that all businesses need to start thinking about. Training around AI education, how to use tools. Way more than just tools, though. There's a lot to it, so we can dig into that. But beyond AI literacy, I mean, the other kind of piece that I think people may or may not be thinking about is human skills, or what some people call soft skills, are going to be increasingly important as machines take over more of the administrative duties. And, really all of us are going to be spending a lot more time face to face, human to human, convincing each other, navigating, negotiating, right? There's all these kinds of skills that I think are going to become much more important, which are the hard skills that are, they always call them soft skills, but they're the hard skills to actually get people to understand and teach and learn. And then the other piece I think that really is starting to be on my mind a lot is management skills. And I mean, obviously management of other employees and humans, but also management of, what people are calling now AI agents, and sort of, having a set of tools that can do a bunch of things for you and needing to manage them. And all of a sudden, you might be literally coming out of your first job with a suite of AI agents or tools or GPTs or whatever you want to call them that do a bunch of things for you. And you need to know how to manage those and navigate those and work with those, right? So we're going to dig into all of those. Let's start off with AI literacy, because this is one we're obviously pretty passionate about. So maybe Josh, I'll get you to start with this one in terms of how to think about AI literacy in an unstructured way, and then also in a structured way as a business leader and as an organization.
Mm, yeah. So thinking about literacy in an unstructured way, like generally when we talk about literacy, people assume it's knowing all the little details and knowing the things related to when we say AI, like things come to mind, right? And so when we talk about AI literacy, you would imagine like knowing more, being more familiar with. But I think a piece that's really often missed is knowing what not to focus on. And the more you develop your AI literacy, the more clear it becomes that you can't actually be the person who's kind of keeping up with everything. If you're just like considering literacy as like knowing what's going on in the news with all the big companies, like, and you're not a technical person, majority of that context is not for you. And if you're a technical person, majority of the context is not for you on the other side of it. There's like a limitless amount of information, and we don't define literacy as knowing a little bit about everything. So we encourage people to stick to what matters and is relevant to you instead of say signing up for 1,000 different newsletters from all different sources. Like it's breadth is not going to help you in this particular piece of literacy. In a structured way, organizational leaders have a responsibility to help their staff identify a path forward in a organized way to learn the things that matter for their work, for their business, and help facilitate getting them the resources they need to develop their intuition from there. So I put the onus and when we talk about structure on leadership, because they're the ones who have to come up with policy and governance. They're the ones who have to create approvals and resource for training and skill development. They're the ones who have to identify where are we going with our organization, not just for AI, but in general, and that's familiar to business leaders in the strategy process, but also now that AI is a huge factor, both on the individual training, skill development piece, but also in the like core technology and core service offering piece. Leaders need to bring clarity to that. And if you're unsure, which is very common right now, like most business leaders are not technology leaders, they're not futurists, they're not innovators in the sense that they're the ones building and pushing this technology forward. They need to be the ones who are literate enough to understand what not to have their staff focus on, literate enough to know where to invest and how to structure this process in a way that doesn't create chaos internally. That would be my structured approach.
Yeah, yeah, and I think as you're talking, it really reminds me of obviously our AI adoption framework process, and specifically around phase two, which is our kind of structures and processes phase. So I've been just going through this process with actually a client right now, and we've been talking through policies and principles, right? And one of the things that I've realized, there's a couple things I've realized over the last year here is number one, people need permission just to try AI tools, to use AI tools, just to like experiment around a little bit. If they don't
Mhm.
get explicit permission from their bosses, they're probably going to do it anyways, but they're probably going to hide their use. And so that's a problem, right? And so really, as much as it's unsexy to talk about policies and process and principles, it's such an important part because at the end of the day, what we see and what statistics show and our own polling shows is that like employees are ahead of their employers in terms of trying this stuff and playing with it and trying to use it, but they're looking for leadership to kind of give them the guardrails or give them the sort of parameters through which they're allowed to use it. It's like, so I had this really detailed conversation yesterday with a client around this kind of concept, and we were talking about AI experimentation, and it's like, yeah, like you probably need to set some parameters as to which tools you're allowed to try and how you're allowed to try those tools, like under which conditions, what data you're allowed to put in and what data you're not allowed to put in, how to decide which tools to experiment with, like, free tools versus maybe paying for a tool for a month. Do you pay for a 12-month subscription or do you just pay for a month to try it, right? Like there's all of this stuff to think through in terms of the structured approach. That's super critical, and really leaders need to lead when it comes to this, and leaders need to step up and they need to sort of give their employees the sort of guardrails and the parameters, right? And then from there, you mentioned something is this AI intuition, which is a really critical part of this whole thing, right? So you and I have talked about this lots, and I've started to talk a lot to clients about this in terms of can you build me a tool that does this? Can you give me a solution that does that? It's like we can, but if you don't have that AI intuition, if you don't have a culture internally on like change management and culture around just, like habit change, people probably aren't going to use it. Like we're very entrenched, right? And so, again, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but even something as simple as going to OpenAI or ChatGPT or Claude instead of Google, like that is a habit change. That actually takes like effort on people's parts, right? And like it actually takes, and you can get there, but like you need to sort of get there first, right? And so to me, in terms of the unstructured part, it starts off with just giving people permission. And again, I did a workshop yesterday where I finished my workshop and the lady was like, this was all very interesting and great, but it's like I don't even know like how to start. Like I don't even know what the tools are. And I was like, okay, like go to chatgpt.com.
Yeah.
And then she was like, so what do I do when I get there? And I was like, and then I was like, oh, okay, like we're really starting from like scratch here. And she said, let me paint you a scenario. Let's just say I'm a realtor and I want to use this tool to figure out how to use it to be a realtor, and how do I use it, right? And I said, you know what, honestly, the best thing you can do is first of all go create an account at chatgpt.com, and then the first prompt you should put in there is I'm a realtor, give me a couple of examples about how I can use you as a tool as a realtor to make me more successful, right? Like literally
Yeah.
it's as simple as that, right? And those are the types of things that are really kind of good in terms of just getting started, right? And then from
Yeah.
there you start to build that intuition. You start to build, like you and I talk about the aha moments all the time. It's like, oh, I did
Mhm.
that thing and it helped me write an email better. It helped me write a letter better. It helped me, I had another, just kind of in storytelling mode here, but I had another client came to me yesterday and was like, I wrote this press release that we're doing together using ChatGPT. It was my first time doing it. It was amazing, right? And so you have those aha moments and you start to build that, oh, okay, I see what this can do for me. And then that builds the curiosity, right? That sort of starts getting people asking then questions, what else can I do? Right? Oh,
Yeah.
what are, right? That type of thing.
Yeah. The curiosity piece is so fascinating because it feels like until that first aha moment triggers, it's only up to people's natural curiosity to drive like how interested or like willing they will be to explore the tool that they haven't done before, which makes sense because like some people love ambiguity, some people jump right in, they don't feel bothered or uncomfortable doing something and being bad at it for the first time. And others do, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's normal. Like we hear that story every single week from people we're training and we're talking to and following up with. How'd it go? Have you been using ChatGPT? No, I just feel like I don't know where I don't want to mess it up. And it like for us that kind of sounds funny because it's like, what are you messing up? You're messing up a conversation that will not be remembered by a tool that is infinitely thinking about other things and is not going to judge you at all. But like,
Yeah.
people just don't like it's just like, oh, well, once you get familiar, you get one little win. It's like going up a roller coaster. You're like tick, 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 and you get to the top of
Yeah.
the hill, you have that first aha moment, and then the curiosity becomes that gravity, really,
The
that
momentum.
then like starts to create momentum and then allows you to get over those other hills and just launch throughout the whole like ride, right?
Yeah.
Um, Curiosity is the piece we saw like the first movers in the space when ChatGPT came out to the public. When we say in the space, we're talking about like generative AI, really past 2.5 years or so. The first movers were all curious people, and now we have everybody who's been either just worried about other stuff and not focused on it, or just waiting on the sidelines for the technology to improve, for them to feel like convinced that it's ready for them to attempt whatever. Now we're dealing with a lot of adoption that's not folks who are just innately curious about the thing. They're more skeptical
Mhm.
because they're logically thinking about, well, is this going to waste my time? Am I going to get lost in a rabbit hole of non-productivity and not actually get what I'm supposed to get done? Like another
Yeah.
phrase we hear very often is like, I haven't had time to look at it yet. And that's like a month or two after we've done our trainings and we've done some coaching and like we're
Yeah.
talking to someone who's just like, yeah, I can't see a time where I get past the pile of work and then I have
Yeah.
like leisure. They see it like that. Like, then I have leisure to like really give this a fair stab, which I can empathize with too. It's like you don't want to waste your time. You're busy, you got stuff going on. Obviously, zoom forward a few thousand hours and like from our perspective, after like that much time in the game, it's like, well, that pile would be non-existent if you were using this tool. That's
Right.
that's what I'm thinking. But we've had to
Yeah.
learn this year, especially as we've had these conversations, it's not that simple for folks. Like,
Yeah.
and my experience and your experience are completely different. And our
Yeah.
relationships with AI basically start and exist on an individual basis. Like there is no like my coworker's doing a really good job, so I'm getting that benefit by osmosis. Like
Yeah.
there is no osmosis here. It's like running. Like you want to get better at running, you can't have someone run for you. Like
Right.
it's
No,
not.
exactly.
And yeah,
Exactly.
I guess we just yeah, we didn't emphasize that throughout most of the year. We figured it out in the last half of the year. It's like, oh wait, no. This is a muscle. I can't just give you all my prompts and you become really, really good at this. Like
Yeah.
that's not how it works. So it's helping people now, like with their intuition, step into figuring one thing out right, documenting what went well, why it was good, and then reinforcing, is there something else at work that's similar to this? Like, can you spot the pattern? And
Yeah.
this pattern will remind you when to hop in. That's sort of
Yeah,
how.
and I'm actually gonna read something. Josh, you wrote me a note here while we were talking, and I think it's perfectly. I think your language here was perfect. So I'm gonna read it verbatim. But you said, think of it like learning to cook. Instead of starting with culinary theory, you begin by successfully making one simple dish. That success gives you confidence, helps you recognize patterns, and builds natural cooking intuition. Soon you're spotting opportunities to apply new patterns to new dishes, growing your capability through practical success. The core principle is simple. Start with one task today, see immediate measurable results, let patterns emerge naturally, build intuition through success, grow capability through practice. I think that's like perfect, honestly, in terms of just like how to like think about it. And then, I'm going to now just sort of take us from there's those people that are at that place, and then you got in your organization people who are like gung-ho and running, and the sort of the first mover type people, right? And so this is what's a bit challenging in terms of AI literacy in an organization, because you have a very wide gamut of people in your organization that are sort of all over the place when it comes to this, right? So I think one of the things that you and I also talk about is things like identifying AI champions, things like internal AI coaching opportunities, things like internal, just having structured internal conversations and dialogue about best practices and learnings, right? Creating an internal AI council. And then even something that you said in terms of some, that what's new and what's happening and what's on the forefront, and paying attention to that. There is a place for that in your organization for somebody. It's just not the thing that everybody should be focused on, right? So there are probably some big picture thinkers in your organization that are probably first movers, that are way up front in terms of their AI intuition and their AI use, and it's probably valuable for them to be paying attention to what's going on, what are the opportunities out there, without getting too lost in the you can go deep into that rabbit hole, but just sort of understanding from your business person, starting to think strategically about, okay, looking out on the horizon and what does this mean for our business in terms of how we can adopt this. And then at the same time, you got to be thinking about the people who are like, inertia to even just start the tool, right? And like there's this wide gamut of people, and you need to kind of develop AI literacy amongst that whole group of people, and sort of get everybody kind of to at least a some kind of medium place where everybody's at least trying and using the tools and feeling comfortable before you can really take the next step and progress your organization into further AI adoption, things like AI powered SOPs and all those types of things, right? So just kind of, do you agree with that? What are your thoughts on sort of that wide gamut of people, and how to kind of get the whole organization to a place that's good enough, I would say, while also not making those people who are way at the front bored?
Right.
How would you navigate that?
Yeah, it reminds me of like a track and field team, or like a large group sport, right? Like football, where you've got tons of people involved, but you've got people that are starters. You've got your team that's going to play, and they're going to compete, and they're going to determine your overall success, like based off of their results. And in the coaching setting, like if you're the leader, you see yourself as the coach, you have assistant coaches on your leadership team and management. It's your job as coaches to identify the best combination of people, right? This is business and building teams. With AI, it's the same way. When you're thinking about where to invest, like you're not going to spend the money to buy one-on-one coaching for your worst athletes. Like they don't, like, unfortunately, that's just how it is. They don't get the attention in the sport. They'll do the exercises that everybody's doing. They'll have their own program that they're on. So it's your job as leadership to establish a structured approach so that the whole group is getting better and making improvements and on their own kind of generalized paths towards success and progress. But then you spend more time with those that are really talented. You spend the time with those that are choosing to go above and beyond, that those that are really building aptitude are the best performant, because the investment you make in them goes way further in that one-on-one time because they're already creating their own momentum. Like when you look at like the star of a team, in even just like I'm thinking about high school level, but if you go to the pros, it's the same thing. Any sport, like they are making progress on their own. Like they are doing their own thing. And like your job as a coach is to give them all the resources you can, right? If you want your top sprinter to have every resource, like unlock the doors for them to come train when they feel
Right.
like they want to, right? Like
Right.
have the resources available to them to pursue this at their pace and encourage them and figure out what do they need to be even more successful. So I think of it as a coaching analogy for sure, because like you wouldn't give that same level of access and attention to the masses, to the kids that are just showing up because their mom made them. Like there's definitely people in this category that, like, when we think about AI adoption, we hear like horror stories of some organizations just like blanketing like a purchase of like ChatGPT for everybody. Everybody gets it. And it's like that's their AI adoption plan, is that everybody gets it. And it's like fast forward, half of those people, like after 6 months, have logged in once because they were told to in a workshop and then never touched it again. And your organization just wasted 6 months of pain for that person to not use the tool, right? So there is that factor that, like, if you don't have a structured plan, you don't have a program in place, you don't have like a path forward identified as leadership, you're going to have people who are just there because the mom told them so. Like,
Yeah.
and that's not something to invest in. That's not giving you an ROI. That's not giving you progress. It's probably slowing down or muddying the waters on like the effectiveness and potential of the capability within your team. So yeah, I think about it like a coaching kind of effort.
Yeah, I like that. And I really like the coaching and team analogy as well, because if I think about a really good star athlete or a leader on the team, they also play a huge role as an influencer in sort of raising the rest of the players on the team and sort of encouraging them and sort of leading by example and all those types of things, right? So it's actually a really great analogy because, you're right. If you invest in those people, you give them the tools, you give them the structures, you get them to lead and they will play an influential role in helping others, right? And I think in this kind of concept as well is also identifying those AI champions or those influencers or those sort of people internally who are those charismatic people that others follow, right? I mean, there is definitely a type mentality that happens or sort of a pack leadership kind of situation that sort of emerges over time. And that's a really good thing, right? So you want to sort of use those internal structures or those informal structures in your organization. And it sort of leads to a really important point around top down versus bottom up in terms of AI adoption, right? So again,
Yeah.
from a top down perspective, as a leadership perspective, if you go in and dictate to people, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to use it, this is what your job is going to be, this is what blah, 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 you're not going to get anybody to follow at all. You're going to get a lot of resistance to change. You're going to get a lot of people's backs up, right? Versus, hey, we're going to set up the parameters, we're going to give you the mechanisms, we're going to set you up for success, and we're going to encourage experimentation, and we're going to clearly communicate the benefits, and we're going to talk as a team, and we're going to foster a growth mindset, and we're going to do all these things around sort of change management type kind of stuff. And then we're going to let the influencers and internal leaders play a role in terms of being, and they don't have to be leaders. Like I had this conversation yesterday with this group around developing an AI council, and they're like, oh, so the AI council doesn't have to be just all the general managers or all the leaders in our organization. I was like, it should not be those people. It should be, hey, if your junior admin person is raising their hand and showing interest and has a lot of is making things happen in your organization, that's a great person. First of all, from their own development perspective, it's a great opportunity for them to show their abilities beyond just their kind of day-to-day job. So that's a fantastic opportunity for development and growth internally. But that person knows on the ground what's going on. That person probably talks to you know all of those sort of people in the organization that are maybe not in the leadership group or whatever. It has a good pulse as to what's going on, and probably could be a really good influencer in helping others adopt this thing, right? So it's really a team approach, and it's really identifying within your team who are those champions at various different levels to kind of get the whole team moving in the right direction or rowing in the right direction, as the phrase goes, right?
Yeah. It going back to the coaching analogy, also like I think it's worth pointing out that no coaching staff is complete with just a head coach. Like,
Yes.
and in the same analogy, you wouldn't hire a head coach to lead a team to do something they don't know something about,
Yeah.
right? Like imagine a track coach coming from like baseball. Like, who are they going to turn to learn the sport of track? Well, at this point, if they don't have like a team of experienced coaches and assistants with them who do know the sports and the players on that team, they're going to go to the players and figure this stuff out. And that's
Yeah.
weird. Like, it
Yeah.
would be weird as a player trying to excel as an athlete and have your coach be like, so like, what drills do you guys do? Like
Right.
that, and that right now is where we are with a lot of AI adoption. We have leadership who doesn't know about this stuff. They haven't worked in change management. They don't know technology. They don't know product life cycles or how to invest in training and development programs at large. And they may have like assistant coaches on the team who do have specialized knowledge. Like the HR department knows about training development. They know about
Right.
change management in theory, and they're in practice every day doing employee relations. Like there's a resource that leadership needs to tap into. And some companies aren't big enough to have their own dedicated HR team, right? But that's that's the case for bringing in coaching who does, right? Like that's
Right.
when we look at a team and they're like, wow, we've been floundering, we don't really know where to go with AI adoption. It's like, great, who in their organization has adopted AI before?
Right.
Nobody. right? And so it's like that's where it makes perfect sense to bring in coaches who have
Right.
specialized areas that they focus in, who can get to know the team and figure out what their strengths are and match that against the patterns they've already seen and the learnings they've already found. So that's a big like thing we've realized, especially in the past few months, is like it's so important to recognize exactly what is going on in the whole AI adoption process before even just like, because a lot of people just haphazardly try to jump in, buy
Hmm.
courses, they hire consultants, like we don't know where to go, what are we doing? And it's like, well, like, no one is teaching that part. Like teach the game and then play it.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
where we found success in this year is teaching the game to leadership from a top-down perspective. Hey, here's the landscape of what's going to happen over the next few years. Here's all the things that we've learned so far in the past few years.
Yeah.
Let's now work forward in a way that's not going to waste everybody's time and not going to slow down progress or not going to defer like value to, a year or two away because we've chosen the wrong strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's
I'll maybe just kind of jump in there and get really practical in terms of, how we've structured our training programs around AI literacy, and just to kind of take everything you just said and sort of put it into kind of a very practical structure. So number one, my main keynote, how to make AI your unfair competitive or your unfair business advantage. It really is that sort of, where did this come from? Where is it going? What are some kind of, couple examples of what can be done with this stuff? It's really that sort of get your mind moving kind of. It's really a keynote type style presentation as opposed to a training
Mhm.
session. But I think it's an important starting point, honestly, because the topic is a big topic, and there's a lot of moving parts in AI, and there's generative AI, and there's all kinds of things, right? So just kind of grounding people in I always think, as a communicator and as a marketer, it's like getting everybody into a common level of understanding of what the hell we're even talking about is the starting point, right? So because
Yeah.
again, people come to these things with a lot of preconceived notions, and Johnny told me it's going to make me lose my job and this and that, right? And so like we need to kind of just address some of those things. So number one is that, that's more of a keynote presentation. And then our intro to AI, course is literally, what is a large language model? What is a chat bot? Right? Like, what are these very basic kind of terms and definitions and things? And then, what are some best practices in terms of how to, a simple prompting technique, how to use these things, right? So, kind of those types of things. And then literally that course, towards the end of that course, it's like we actually get in, we start using ChatGPT. We pick ChatGPT, it could be any model, but we pick ChatGPT because it's got a lot of good functionality from a teaching perspective, right? And so it's like actually getting people to use ChatGPT, right? And actually trying it for the first time, or if they haven't tried it for the first time, it's like, again, some of those people that are maybe more advanced, the way we've designed our exercise, it's a really cleverly designed exercise because the people that are brand new to it, never tried it, it's like they're going to go through the exercise the way they're going to go through it. People that have a little bit more AI intuition are going to see that exercise, they're going to do it a different way. And then what we do at the very end of that exercise is we have a discussion about, how did you do it? And then that's where the aha moments start to happen, because somebody in the team will inevitably say, I did it this way. And then the rest of the team will say, holy shit, that was amazing. Like, what? And it'll like blow their minds. Right. And then at the end of that one, and then I show, this is what else you could do after you've done this exercise. And I show a whole bunch of different things that are just like, again, mind blowing kind of things, right? Just to kind of get people excited. Right. And then the second course, we kind of dive into ChatGPT much more detailed in terms of things like, what are custom GPTs? How do you customize your chat GPT instance to make it work better for you? How do you prompt it so that it doesn't, do certain things? Like, so we get kind of deep dive into, again, we just pick one tool because I'll talk about other tools in a second. So anyways, long story short, we've picked one tool just to give people a grounding with one tool and really start to get more value out of that tool. And here's the Canvas feature, and here's how it works in terms of searching the internet. And right. So again, it's just deep diving into one tool, showing them in one tool what is possible and what the capabilities of that tool are. And again, getting them doing some exercises, getting them working with the tools. So building that AI muscle is kind of the second course. And then the third course, the one that more you teach, is more around that kind of how to approach AI from a task perspective. So maybe I'll get you to talk about the third course a little bit more just from a conceptual perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first two workshops do a really good job of serving those aha moments. That's the thing, like I've distilled it to is for the most part, and getting someone introduced and familiar with like the interface and the features in these basic chatbots. Workshop three is all about applying it to something that we know all tourism organizations face, whether you're a DMO, whether you're a destination. The common thread we find is everybody writes grants, everybody applies for grants, everybody has to manage grants. So we take a really practical approach and break down the grant writing process into step-by-step tasks and then show which tasks could be enhanced with AI. And that's how, once again, we reinforce, start with one task, see immediate measurable, results, learn patterns, or let the patterns emerge naturally, build intuition through that success, and then grow capability through practice. So we help people not just like do it in a workshop, but we in those sessions have had people apply for grants in real time. We've heard amazing stories like as we've gone that, someone figured out, oh man, there was a grant that was available to me tonight at midnight and it's 2 in the afternoon and I really want to apply for it. So I used ChatGPT following this kind of approach and got it done. Submitted my grant. Didn't spend a week on it. Didn't have to hire the grant writer. Like those are the sort of wins we see by just applying the concepts to like a real practical use case that everybody deals with in the space. And that's the whole point of workshop 3 is like boots on the ground, not just head in the clouds theory, not just ideas in the middle, but let's do something productive together. And that once again kind of starts to build this flywheel of momentum where people can start to see patterns. They can start to identify. One of my favorite quotes I heard in the last month was like a lady who shared, I am learning every day that I can use AI a little bit more. And she's like, the hardest part is remembering that it's there for me. Like it's a
Right.
resource. She's like, I just am used to doing things the way I've been doing things, and I forget like I'm sitting here thinking about something that I could have been talking to ChatGPT about and getting my thoughts out of my head.
Yeah.
Like
And
that
that's
was my
that AI
favorite quote.
intuition. That starts to become that AI, the
Yeah.
building that AI muscle and that intuition, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. And then just sort of, we have a couple of courses that we're planning to introduce in the early 2025. So one is Intro to Ethics in AI. So again, that's just a very kind of is what it is. Obviously, what are the ethical considerations and those types of things. And then another course we're planning to introduce early is data management in the AI era, because the other piece that you and I talk about a lot, Josh, is just around how to structure your data, how to label your data, how to organize your data, how to, right? Like there's a lot around, really when you're getting into the deeper AI use cases, like actually AI enabling your organization from the ground up, then really your data needs to be in place first, right? So that those are coming soon. So we'll talk about that. So anyways, there's definitely lots. I mean, we do a lot of different things, and we have, then it gets into more of a one-on-one coaching. And so again, I don't want to make this a sales pitch for what we do, but I just wanted to explain on a practical level how our courses are structured to help people through this process, starting from literally, I've never even like used the tool in my life. I don't even know which tool to download, to okay, now I'm using it, I'm developing a muscle, I'm sort of developing an intuition, and I'm ready to kind of get going. And then that actually sets your organization up for success in terms of the next phase of AI adoption in your organization, which is a much more structured phase of AI adoption, and thinking of it systematically, and thinking about how we can now think about updating our standard operating procedures to implement AI, and how now you can get into start thinking about tools that we might be able to implement to do certain things for us, because now we actually have buy-in and we have this intuition and we have all these kinds of things that are happening. And part of also too, in terms of developing um, policies and principles, and then developing things like internal AI councils, and developing opportunities for people to have conversations internally about AI, because we also need to do things like address resistance, and we need to understand where the resistance is, and we need to, right? We just need to, there's a lot of conversations internally that need to happen. So anyways, we'll pause there in terms of AI literacy, AI skills, because you and I probably could talk about this for months, but let's move on to human skills or soft skills, right? So, I mean, this isn't really something that's Tourism AI Academy sort of program or anything like that, or something we teach necessarily, but I just want to talk about it in context of how important it is in the AI era. And I'm gonna introduce this with a couple of different things. So number one, I always in my keynote presentation talk about the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report, and I always put up a slide that has the top 10 skills of the future. And so I'm going to read those skills, and then we could talk about it. So number one is analytical thinking. Number two is creative thinking. Number three is resilience, flexibility, and agility. Four is motivation and self-awareness. Five is curiosity and lifelong learning. Six is technological literacy, which is probably those AI skills we just talked about. Seven is dependability and attention to detail. 8 is empathy and active listening. 9 is leadership and social influence. And 10 is quality control. So I like to talk about these as these are literally the World Economic Forum's opinion of the top 10 skills of the future. And like one of them is about AI literacy. So let's, sort of start there. What are your thoughts on that list and the importance of these skills in this AI driven era that we're in?
Yeah, I think the pitfall of this list, the only thing I would say that might be misleading to folks is thinking that the technology skill is where AI starts and ends. Like when we look at training for intuition, when we look at developing AI skills and helping people with their soft skills, all of those things apply to being better at using these tools now, being better and more creative at applying them to the work that we do, and using those skills to help transition from where I work now to where I want to work or could work in the future, given this technology. Like it's all encompassing, which sounds like hyperbole, but like if you go through each one of those, there's a case you can make for how it ties in to what we teach every day, to what we're talking
Agreed.
about and why it matters. So that would be my caveat to the list is like that, like those skills are chosen for a reason. And the same, the communication skills, the attention to detail, the quality control, like if you just like haphazardly go about your work and you don't apply these things, and as the coming years approach, like as we get better AI technology, as we get better products out there, as we get better interfaces for work, those things become way more important as we rely on computers to do more work with us, for us, on our behalf.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna actually just kind of jump off on the point you just made in terms of the first two, analytical thinking and creative thinking. So, I always sort of when I talk about this list, I actually tell people that in my opinion, the number one skill of the future is discernment. And that really comes into this analytical thinking, creative thinking, you know,
Mhm.
those types of skills, because at the end of the day, now we're in this like new world where we're lying where this technology is kind of giving us answers, and those answers aren't always correct, and those answers sometimes have hallucinations in them, and so we really need to think critically, and we really need to think analytically, and we really need to be discerning, and we really like need to almost have this like skepticism with every single thing that comes out of the tool every single time, which you're absolutely right, Josh. It's like that is a critical skill for AI literacy, right? Like, first of all, understanding that these things make mistakes and they could be extremely convincing in the way they make their mistakes, or they just make things up. And then knowing as a human where I need to double check, right? That's that quality control or the attention to detail and all those types of things, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you're bang on in that, and that as much as their soft skills. So it's like funny. So like actually these human skills are becoming more important in terms of AI literacy and using AI tools successfully, right? Is kind of what you're
Totally.
saying.
Totally. I have a perfect example of like just why it's so important. This week I'm working on drafting more content and revising content for a new website we're launching. And I got some feedback from one of my like test users about like an idea in the middle of one of the sections. And I'd asked some clarifying questions, gone back and forth, and then I just copy and pasted this like block of conversation. And I told my chat, here's a block of conversation we're having about this section, yada yada yada. And in the feedback, like perfect example, in this chatbot, first of all, I have 20 documents clearly articulating every single thing and all the nuance of this brand, all the brand guidelines, the editorials, the here's what we say, here's what we don't say, here's like exactly how we call ourselves this. All that has been clearly defined, right? It's been written down. And I've had chats all week with this thing, different conversations, whatnot. I paste this in here. The person who was leaving feedback used the wrong brand name. Like they just like switched the words up a little bit. Not a big deal, not offensive at all to me. I paste that in as the feedback, and my chat just like takes it and worked. Like they're like, yeah, like that's it. Just like assumed that was the new name of the brand as we were
Mm,
talking about iterating. I like looked at the output when I would ask it to do its thing, and it was completely off. And I had to remind the thing. I was like, "Hey, did you forget that we have come up with this branding? Like
right.
we are the ones who own it and are the ones who are supposed to protect and uphold it." And it was like, "Oh yeah, yeah." my bad. And then it did it again, like 5 minutes later when when I did something else. And I was like, seriously? But like that just shows like it's not like a person who's gonna sit there and be like, oh yeah, duh, like I'll remember that. Like these things are different than like they're different slightly than how we interact with humans in that like every conversation could be held in an isolated box without
Mhm.
too much memory. Even when we apply memory, it still doesn't recall the right memory all the time. So being articulate and figuring out like how you have like deploy your soft skills as a person is super important, not just for communicating to it, but then receiving that, being critical, analyzing, quality control, like all of those things you listed off, like in just that one instance, like when I'm thinking about it, like if I slacked off on any one of those things, this thing just like
Yeah.
goes to like zero help,
Yeah.
but it looked really nice. Like if
Yeah,
I,
it sounded convincing, right? Yeah.
yeah, and it was just making it up, right? So
Yeah.
that's why it's so important. We've never had something that sounds and emulates human intelligence so well and yet could be completely hallucinating the entire fact of everything. All the facts
Yeah.
could be completely wrong, but it'll say it really nice.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, so yeah, that's a great example. And so yeah, these soft skills or human skills are, especially important. And so even in terms of developing AI policies and principles, like some of these probably things need to be like written into those policies and principles, right? In terms of like, hey, and actually this is the conversation I had with the group I talked to yesterday, around quality control, for example, the principle around quality control. And it's like, the policy or the principle that we came up with, some of the wording is like, hey, we understand that these things make mistakes and they hallucinate. And so we have systems and processes to ensure that there's a human oversight at every step of the process, and that there's humans are making the final decision on things, and we are not just giving decision making authority away to these tools willy-nilly, like we like very very specific things in the policy. And again, that's guidance for your employees now in terms of like, oh yeah, okay, like that's like a and I was explaining to them, how to use these policies and principles once we have them written. It's like, oh, when you're kind of going through these with your staff, it's a talking point. Here's why this is important. Here's what can happen. Here's right. And it's a talking point for your staff to help them think through all the scenarios that we, just listed and talked about as an example, right? So yeah, it's a really interesting point. We're in this very interesting world where this isn't software that just like does the exact same thing every single time, the exact way you want to do it perfectly. You to your point, you change one word and the whole thing can like come up with weird things, and it's a whole different thing, right? So and that's where, getting into things like, AI enhanced SOPs or SOPs for AI and things like that, where maybe we're even putting in very specific prompts and very specific words and very specific languages, or building custom tools with very specific right knowledge bases. But you know, mistakes still happen and whatever. And so ultimately the main point here is that we need humans to use all of their human skills to make sure that their AI literacy and their AI skills are top notch, and they're not making stupid mistakes, right? All right, so let's move on to the last skill of the future, in our opinion, which is management skills. This one is a very interesting one in context of the fact that, we're on the cusp of the agentic future everybody's been kind of raving about and talking about. And I don't like the word AI agents in their current form today, so I'm just going to caveat it with, I'm going to call it an AI agent could be just a customized tool built on specialized knowledge base with a very specific job.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're getting into this place where we're getting these tools that can do these things for us, and we're building tools that have more capabilities that can start to take some actions on our behalf or whatever. And so let's talk a little bit about now management skills in terms of managing a team of AI agents or customized AI tools. What are your initial thoughts when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that it's something that challenges, I guess, traditional ideas around management. Like managers and individual contributors have always been seen separately for the most part in business, like teams. Like if you're technical at some point in STEM, you're gonna hit a crossroads in your career development where your leadership and maybe your HR is talking to you like, hey, do you want to lean more into management or do you want to go become a subject matter expert? And if you choose subject matter expert, you got to like split here, choose not management and become like a researcher or a PhD or whatever, you go deeper into your field. and not like which distances you from the people side of like becoming a leader, building a management team underneath you. With agents, the expectation, it's not now, but the expectation that will be here in the next couple of years is that every single person be a manager of agents. Like every single person will have a swarm of assistants helping them that we call agents. The interface for those has not been defined yet. That's the big thing that all the big providers and really the technologists and the futurists are working on right now. What does that interface look like? Is it one chat that chats to many? Like one interface that you talk to or speak to or video conference with that then like has its own swarm of helpers that are all specialized into all the different tools and tasks that you have. So management, it starts at least with a mindset shift of like, I can have a team now. Like I don't have to like wait. If I have a pro ChatGPT account, I can make the custom GPT that does my grant writing. I can make the GPT that helps me with proposals, or that helps me analyze feedback, or that helps me draft my emails, or that helps me do this, that, and the other data analysis, you name it. And instead of thinking about it like humans, where you hire somebody and they have to do like a multitude of things, you're gonna create one little agent for each little thing. So the total number of agents in organizations is going to be wild. My running, I guess, assumption is that every organization, instead of having like industry-wide, like vertical AI agents, which is what like the investor market is really like hype on, like Y Combinator folks are like, everybody needs to be building vertical AI agents for industries. It's like, that's too broad. Every person is going to have their own suite of agents that's like vertical to them, and every organization is going to have agents that are only related to like there's not like we make one for one DMO and every other DMO gets to have the same thing. They might
Right.
be similar in shape, but they're completely different in terms of form, function, knowledge, context, data, etc. So I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing, and it kind of starts this technical conversation of like product management, but also like until processes are mapped out and people have like really organized what they're doing. I think that's really step one in terms of
Yeah.
becoming a manager is knowing what work is getting done, what's the tasking, what's the budget for it, how long is it taking, what are your measurements to show success, how do you measure quality, how do you actually define what is being worked. If you haven't written that down, it's going to be really hard to choose where the agents go. And so that's where we're now starting. Like we start by helping people map out their SOPs, combine all those SOPs to determine like, is this an accurate picture of what the team does? If yes, great. If no, what's missing? Fill in all the blanks. Do that team by team by team, and now you have a good idea of where the organization's at. And if you're a leader and you're looking down at your org chart with people, you're just seeing names and faces and roles and titles, not tasking. I do think this whole concept adds and helps with this conundrum that's always been in like corporate work or just like work as we know it in this day and age is like everybody has too much work and no one's getting enough credit or pay.
Right.
That's like a general like axiom. Like everybody's just kind of like, ah, I have too much work. I'll get to it later. I'm just always busy. And then also like, why can't I afford I feel like I should be able to afford all this stuff that I need for my life. Like there are these big problems that just are kind of we accept, but like over time, like when it doesn't cost as much to get the stuff done, like maybe that starts to resolve. Maybe it helps. Maybe it, I don't know, maybe it makes it way worse. But like these are the things that do get really interesting that you don't have to think about if you're just dealing with people. But now with tech, when we start to solve these problems, we create a lot more structure. And that's what I guess the story of 2024 has been for a lot of organizations. Those that are winning with AI adoption have already set out to become really, really, really structured in the way that they do things, the way that they project manage, communicate, write down, organize data, et cetera, et cetera. And the companies that haven't started on that yet, you got time. We're just at the end of the first adoption wave. Like the first mover wave is now like crashing to a close.
Yeah.
2025 is all about like everybody else, and that's the majority. So if you feel like you're
Yeah.
falling behind, like you're not, but we're ready for you. That's we're ready to get started. That's where we're at now. Is it's
Yeah.
time to
Yeah.
begin.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I always like to tell people, think about when it comes to this concept of managing AI agents or managing whatever. This is even just managing tools, right? So even it doesn't have to be as complicated as managing an agent or, whatever. It could be just how do you use ChatGPT successfully because the same principles apply, right? It's like, okay, you want to use this tool to help you with a task. You need to think about what you want it to help you with. You need to think about what context you need to give it. You need to think about what success looks like, right? And then you need to work with it just like you'd work with, work with a staff person that you had that worked for you, right? So it's like, okay, here's how to set you up for success. Here's the information you're going to need. Here's what success. Here's an example of a finished product that we've done for this client before. Okay, go give it a try. And then, again, it's not like the first time the new staff person comes back with a finished deliverable, it's going to be 100% perfect. It's like now you work and you iterate, right? And so even at the very basic level of just using a basic tool or creating maybe a custom GPT or whatever, the same principles of like management or like apply, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually a really useful starting point as we prepare for this future where we have these AI agents, whatever, that can take actions and do more complicated things on our behalf. Is like, think about it just at the literally individual task level or individual, I don't want to say prompt level, but almost at that basic level. And this is the other place where I think a lot of people kind of get it wrong with AI. Is like, oh, I tried it once and the output wasn't very good, so therefore it's not a very good tool. And it's like, well, no, you really failed in terms of your managing, first of all, your own expectations. But it's like, oh, is that what you do with your human resources? Oh, I gave them one task when they started for me and it wasn't, perfect. And so therefore they're not a good employee. Absolutely not. Right. So think same mindset, right? So
Yeah.
it's a mindset and it's a concept, a conceptual mindset to get your head around. I think that's a really valuable starting point. All right. So I'm going to pause there on those three skills. So again, we think AI literacy, human skills, and management skills are sort of the skills of the AI driven future. But before I let you go, Josh, I'm springing a new thing on you here. I'm just curious about what your thoughts are and maybe advice for people thinking about going to college or university or coming out of high school and thinking about their future in this AI era. If you had one piece of advice to give them in terms of like picking a major, picking a direction, picking sort of how to go about thinking about the future, knowing that AI is here, just totally springing this on you out of the blue, but I'm curious
Yeah.
what your piece of advice would be.
I love that question. First, think about the skills, the list of skills that Peter talked through, the 10, right? What are the 10 most important skills of the future? On that list, did you see getting good grades? Did you see making your parents happy with choosing their major of your choice? Did you see doing what everybody else is doing? No. And it's very easy culturally with college, especially now, for students that are good at school to think, I go to college, I get great grades, I then get a nice job, I can start my future, yada, yada, yada. And that's true in fields that are growing. But also, if you look at how AI is impacting the fields that are available now, not all the same fields that were growing when your parents went to college and the people that are giving you advice about where to go and what to do, doctors, lawyers, engineers, like these are fields that are important, they're necessary. Are they growing compared to other places? Something I'm big and bullish on is like, especially I mentor high school kids, we have this conversation a lot. For the kids that aren't super into classes in school, don't go to college. I always will
Yeah.
say that I will stand by this. There are more jobs, there are millions of jobs that are in demand just because baby boomers who worked in trades, who owned businesses, are retiring. Welders, electricians, plumbers, builders, carpenters. You name it, there's a trade out there where I would wager the job growth is going to be a multiple of 2, 3, 5, 10x growth just to keep up with the demand of grandpa retired and closed his, electrical shop.
Yes.
If you're debating that and you're like, but I have all this money I saved up, which is a great problem to have, go buy a small business, learn a trade, do something of that nature. If you're into school or you're into tech, learn tech. That's a growing field. And it's like that you'll hear a lot of doom and gloom folks talk about like AI killed this, AI killed that, like AI killed designers, engineers, etc. Software engineers will never be the same. It's like, well, software engineering is going to be around forever. AI is taking on the programming parts. But guess what's really hard for engineers who learn programming and not the other side of the people skills, the soft skills, the communication, the critical thinking, the creative thinking out of the box. Those are the skills that last, and that's why they're on that list. So
Yeah.
look at the list. look to your own skill set. Like if you're the like D's and C's and maybe B student in high school, like maybe just look at a trade school or apprentice program. I was that kid. I went to a 2 year associate college because I didn't know what I wanted to do and I wasn't an A student. Found out in that timeline I really liked HR and business, so I then finished my degree at a 4 year college. Went to a great program, had a great experience. But the promise of like go to college, get a good job, get a house, start a family, all that stuff is like that doesn't have to be your narrative. And a lot of people think that's the only path.
Yeah, I love it. Great
I could
advice. Yeah, I'm gonna
stay on that
maybe give.
soapbox forever. Sorry.
No, no, it's a great soapbox, and I'm gonna give kind of similar. My version of that advice is, first of all, I'm gonna 100% agree with you that not even, you know, I sometimes tell people. So I have a BCom, so a Bachelor of Commerce, and I have an Executive MBA. So I'm educated to the, I'm educated highly. And if I had to go back and do it again, honestly, and this is like probably a lot of parents are gonna just like kill me for saying this, but it's like I would have not done any university. I would have went straight into business and trying to run a business or build a business or buy a business, and I would have learned all of the things I learned in the school of hard knocks in real life as quickly as possible in my 20s. And I can guarantee you I'd be 10 times wealthier than I am now because I spent a lot of money and a lot of time on school and whatever. And I learned great things and I don't regret anything I did at all, like zero. I don't want to make it sound like I have regrets because I went to school, and I don't want to discourage people from going to school if they want to go to school. But my point is that there's a lot of opportunities right now in today's world for just hands-on learning, micro learning, micro credentialing. Like things are changing so fast that even just jumping on this AI bandwagon and sort of learning and being, there's a lot of need for AI skills, all those types of things. So that's kind of point one. Point two is if you're going to go to college or going to go to university or going to go to, post-secondary or more advanced education, I really think that, having some generalist skills is really valuable no matter what, right? Because we don't really know. Yes, having some specialized skills is important and valuable as well. So I wouldn't go too deep and too specialized into anything. You can, but not too like I don't think you want to narrow and pigeon yourself whole into like one thing super super deep unless you're like going to go do a PhD and be an academic and go down that route. But in terms of just like a 4 year degree or whatever, you're probably better off trying to find a little bit of balance of some specialized knowledge and also some broad generalized skills, because we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And so having that broad skill set and, liberal arts education, all those types of things, those are the places where you learn the critical thinking skills and the analytical skills and the people skills and the human skills that we talked about, right? Like, I think people undervalue the fact that, when you go to an English honors course or an English course or whatever, it's like you're learning a lot of these skills in a very practical way. And you may not think, what's the applicability of this? Well, you're actually like university teaches people how to think, which is a really huge skill and an important skill, right? Like just think critically on your own, independently, right? Challenge your thinking, those types of things. So, just I think to your point of what you're saying is like, first of all, I can be on a soapbox all day about not just doing what your parents tell you. So I have a book outline written called Life by Design. And the first half of my book is called Mommy and Daddy Issues. Everybody has them. And the only way you're going to live your life by your design is by getting over what your parents want and running and pursuing your passions and your dreams and things you're passionate about and you care about, right? And so that's, again, I can I can talk about that for hours, but
I love
but
that.
here's but the point is, I think, traditional ways and approaches probably aren't as relevant today as they were. I think that's what you and I both are saying. So don't be afraid to be non-traditional, and don't be afraid to be broad and general, and maybe a little like, right, let your intuition guide you. And I would just say that as of today, you mentioned something, Josh, in terms of, people are saying this profession is gone because of AI. As of today, right now, December 2024, zero professions are eliminated as a result of AI, as far as I know, right? So there's a lot of hype in media and all this kind of stuff about job displacement. That has not happened yet. And, so don't live your life based on things that could happen, because we don't know what's going to happen. So, I guess ultimately pursue your passions, pursue your dreams, let intuition guide you, and just keep on carrying on. You'll be just fine. Nice. All right. Well, that's the end of our episode. Thanks, Josh. We got really philosophical at the end there, but I
Good. That
appreciate
was
the
good.
conversation. Nice. Talk to you next time.
Thanks for joining Peter and Josh on another episode of the Tourism AI podcast, where they dive into the AI tools they're building to help tourism operators and DMOs perform, as well as other relevant updates for the tourism industry. Stay up to date between episodes at tourismainetwork.com or on socials at Tourism AI Network.